Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This may be your first event at Risky Business, so if it is, welcome. I'm Tom Venables. I'm a Senior Manager and Chief Strategist for Turnkey, and I'll be the host for the session, implementing Identity-Centric Zero Trust. Just tripped off the tongue. If you would like to ask any questions through the session, feel free to use the chat feature or the Q&A feature at the right of the screen. And we will be hosting a Q&A immediately, 15 minutes after this session, and we'll pick up those questions there and have an open and honest discussion about them. I'm really excited to be joined today by Mustafa Helmi from SailPoint. Unfortunately, Kevin from Beyond Trust is having a few technical issues at the moment. We're hoping he's going to join us as we go through. But Mustafa is going to speak to us about the importance of placing identity at the center of the zero trust approach to securing critical assets. So welcome, Mustafa. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi. Yeah. Thanks, Tom. So hi, everyone. My name is Mustafa Helmi. I'm a solutions consultant here at SailPoint. So I've been working in the identity field for just over 8 years, different vendors, different roles, from technical support to implementation, consulting, and now in the pre-sales world. And I'm really excited to be speaking to you about why having identity at the center of your zero trust architecture is the only solution.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for joining us. If you could just click through to the third slide, please. So as a quick overview, in this session, we'll be exploring how important identity is in the attacker's portfolio of tricks to exploit vulnerabilities and to attack our organizations, why it's resulted in an increased need to secure identity, and how zero trust is dependent on that identity piece of the puzzle as a foundational step in securing critical assets, data, processes, etc. After the pandemic of the last couple of years, we've shifted working patterns. And so the concept of the traditional perimeter has been eroded. And as we'll discuss, identity is pretty much the network perimeter or the perimeter defense now. And it's never been more important to understand who's accessing our data, from where, and for what purposes. So hopefully you'll leave with a good appreciation of that challenge. Without any further ado, Mustafa, over to you to talk us through it.
Sure. So I think what we wanted to start with is, why the zero approach now? Because zero approach seems to be kind of a buzzword that everyone is mentioning. But the idea behind, zero trust and why it's very crucial right now is just as you explained. So the perimeter has changed. Previously you had all of your resources protected behind your internal network, behind your internal firewalls. You know exactly which devices are going to access these resources from where. However, that has all changed, and it's been, very different in the past few years. So now all of the data is just moving to the cloud. A lot of our users are no longer within our perimeter. You have bring your own devices. You have people working from homes, from cafes, using public networks. So our approach to this, different and expanding attack surface has to change, and it has to adapt to basically fit all of these new challenges that we have. So previously, we had this term in the industry, which is trust but verify, but that has also had to change right now. So the new logo, or the new mantra we have to go by is never trust, always verify. So for each and every request from a user or an entity, whether that be a human user or a machine identity, whatever that may be, we have to verify who is actually behind that request and ensure that it's the right person. And the next step is we also have to contextualize each and every resource request. So whether that, again, is a human identity, it's a machine identity, what time are they trying to access that resource? What device are they using to access those resources? Are they from, using Wi-Fi, wired in, different internal networks? That all plays a key role in determining whether we should allow or deny that access request. And finally, being able to intelligently and seamlessly manage all those different authorizations for people and devices to all the different data and application endpoints is very crucial in just connecting the right people to the right levels of access at the right time.
Absolutely. And I think, people, as you say, are treating zero trust as a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but it is that shift in thinking from we are suspicious of every attempt to access our systems and data, rather than we trust 90% of the network traffic that we see.
Absolutely. Because right now it's 90% of the traffic is no longer within the network as opposed to before. So when we talk about zero trust with having an identity-centric zero trust and that type of architecture, it's not just one product that kind of gives you the whole architecture. It's actually 3 different swim lanes or different technologies that all work together to allow you to achieve that architecture. So you have identity governance, which is the controlling and ensuring that the right people are authorized for the right levels of access across the right resources at any point in time. You have identity and access management, which is the gateway or kind of the verification of who is behind those requests in real time. And then you have privileged access management, which is the additional control and additional layers of security and governance and auditing around your key resources and kind of the keys to the kingdom within your organization.
Absolutely.
So without having tight integrations between all of these different swim lanes and different solutions, you will end up still having some blind spots. And that's where typically each and every single attack, each and every single breach that has happened recently, it has relied on these blind spots within your organization. So whether one solution is not tightly integrated with the other, where's this dark area where we do not have that visibility, that's where all of the risk comes from. And that's where typically attackers will try and exploit those areas of blind spots, which is why it's very crucial for us not to have a siloed solution approach in this case. And this is why we have to have these tight integrations between these different solutions to ensure that every single blind spot between these solutions is covered, and we have that full visibility of who has access to what and how is access being used and all of that within across all of the organization and across all of your applications.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because not only are these potentially different technical solutions, different tooling providing these, you've also got different owners within the organization, and they need to come together and integrate to achieve this sort of zero trust approach, this coordinated defense, if you want to call it that.
Absolutely. And this is basically the theme of what we're going to try and talk about and explain today, right? Which is how can these solutions work together to help eliminate those blind spots and give you that kind of deep and tight integration across these different systems. And eventually you'll see how the whole architecture can come together and give you that kind of best practice that we're talking about. And for that, we actually have a short demo that's that we'd like to show you for this integration between SailPoint and BeyondTrust, and which hopefully will give you a good idea of how that integration looks like, what exists where, how does the end result look like, and we can continue discussions afterwards.
Fantastic.
I'm aware that there are some of us on the call that have seen the SailPoint platform. Some might have seen Identity-IQ. This is Identity now.
I think we've lost the audio, Mustafa.
Oh. Let me...
And I just want to take a step back, and I think it was Nico or Rian asked about the integration. So I can quickly touch on that. I was going to try and not do the techie side of things, Usually the account execs kick me underneath the table. But essentially, what I've got configured in my environment is an on-prem password safe. Okay. Fortunately, there is no difference between the on-prem versus the cloud version, because the two versions are running basically the same. So if you've got on-prem versus the cloud, as long as you're on the version 21.x and higher, you're going to have the same experience. Okay. But in terms of connectivity, I'm going to quickly show you the connector. Previously, it would be some SCIM configurations. Okay. Now it's a question of looking at the connections settings. So it's either OAuth or an API token, which gets generated pretty simple on the Beyond Trust side of things. We do have the ability to ingest certificates onto the virtual appliance if you do have a custom certificate. But it's as simple as this. When we look at aggregation settings, these are this is basically the schema, the account schema, all the attributes that we can pull from Beyond Trust. Now, some of them, I didn't delete any of them, but some of them are basically there, and I can delete them. So I'm not using like address, work, primary, postal code in my demo environment, but it depends on your organization. You might want to tie that into your privileged accounts for a repudiation, forensics, and that sort of thing. Okay. Then we've got the additional settings, which is basically a retry. Okay, and that's how quick and simple it is in terms of onboarding this as a source. Okay. Just waiting to go back. Okay. Then in terms of aggregation, so when we import the data, we are looking at the typical, exactly the same as other systems. We do an account discovery where we discover all the accounts, and then we do an entitlement discovery. Okay. And I'm going to touch on the entitlement discovery first. These are the local groups which I've discovered on Beyond Trust, okay, on the password safe, as well as the Active Directory groups on Beyond Trust. Now you'll notice that if I go into my Active Directory, which is configured in my environment, I'm going to have these here too. Okay. The only reason for that is that when we've aggregated on the Beyond Trust side, in order for the password safe to pick up the users, they add that as an Active Directory group. Okay, so that's the only reason why we're seeing these. Okay, going to the account side of things. So these, sorry, before I move on, I'm getting ahead of myself. So from a local account perspective, we aggregate and we see which ones have permissions and which ones don't. So when we say it's got a permission, okay, that means that it's got a smart rule or smart group attached to it for a managed account perspective, okay? And for example, this is the local Beyond Trust approvers group to approve access requests and that sort of thing. So if I go into this entitlement, and apologies if it's a bit technical, I'm going to get an understanding of this from a technical perspective, okay? But if I click on the permission side, okay, this is going to give me a little bit more context into the permissions that it's got. So for example, this is the password safe role assigned to that group, okay, the local group, and this is the permission. So it's only able to read, okay? So when we are assigning the permission side of things, it's read access or full control. And when we are assigning the password safe, are you a requester, okay, or are you an approver? Okay, so that's the visibility we're getting from an entitlement perspective. When we start doing account correlation, now we always talk about having an authoritative source, okay? Now, this is where we're able to start saying which accounts are local and which ones are not local. So for example, these accounts that you're seeing here, where I've got the username or account names and usernames, that means SailPoint has discovered and correlated based on an authoritative source. So we've taken attributes from Beyond Trust, and we've picked up that Aaron Nichols, for example, is in an authoritative source, which we've onboarded, okay? When we talk about local accounts as an example, we can start saying these are either service accounts or local accounts on the Beyond Trust password safe appliance, okay? Now, very importantly here, as you can see that my BT admin, for example, is uncorrelated, just to show that it is a local account. We can very quickly export these uncorrelated accounts and start managing those. And this is part of the data cleanup. So like Nico and Rian were talking about discovering the accounts and then understanding which ones aren't correlated. So these could potentially, like I said, be service accounts or local accounts, which are still existing on the password safe, which may have been users that have left or contractors that have left, as an example. And you can start using this to do your data cleaning. Okay. Okay, so I put a lot of emphasis on the identity cube. So I've got my actor Jerry Bennett. We always use this. Essentially, from an identity cube perspective, giving that responsibility back to business and making them make the decisions. And I mean, who knows the staff better than their own manager at the end of the day? So, you know, from a centralized visibility perspective, and I'm going to pick on Amanda Ross here, is that the manager needs to be responsible for the employee and why they're requesting access and why they need that access and revoking that access. So typically when we're doing attestations, it will always go to the manager first as an example, and then it will go to the system owner, because, you know, getting that call it closed feedback, closed loop verification. And that's why we always talk about verifying, constantly verifying it, because the manager might be at a stage of, you know what, I don't want Amanda Ross to lose this access, or the system owner might say, I don't know Amanda Ross, I don't want to revoke this access because I'm scared that Amanda won't be able to do their work again. Okay, and then it's this whole huge issue again, and escalations and that sort of thing. But from an identity queue perspective, I've only got Active Directory and Beyond Trust on here, but at a glance, I'm able to see all the accounts that Amanda Ross has. So Amanda's got a local account here, okay, and the source would be my password safe, okay, and then Amanda's also got an Active Directory account, okay. But if I look at it from an entitlements perspective, this gets a bit noisy, okay? You know, for a standard normal user to take a look at. But for example, I can see that as a manager, Amanda Ross has got access to the approvers group, which is the Active Directory group where they are allowed approving access requests on Beyond Trust, okay, or on the password safe. But then I can also see that Amanda Ross has got database access, admin access, and it's privileged. Okay, we gathered this information from the password safe itself. Why? Because Beyond Trust aggregates to Active Directory, and we've also picked that up from Beyond Trust, from the password safe. So we pull that all into the identity queue. Okay, in terms of roles, we always talk about role-based access, okay, and getting that role-based access kicked off. It's not easy, and we are able to, from a SailPoint perspective, help with this using artificial intelligence, machine learning, where we use peer group analysis and that sort of thing. But essentially, when we talk about least privilege and the usability of being able to only request access for what you need, is building out those roles and allowing your users to request only what they need, okay? So in this scenario, I've created two roles. One is for Beyond Trust approvers, and another one is for database administrators, okay? Now, the beauty of this is that Jerry can take a look and see what this access is, okay? And in terms of his responsibility for Amanda, he now needs to understand, does Amanda still need to be a Beyond Trust approver? So we haven't even touched on the certification campaigns yet, or the attestations. Jerry might have to do this from a KPI perspective once a week or once a month to go through his employees to make sure that they've got the right access. And essentially, Jerry's now been made aware that, okay, Amanda doesn't need this access anymore. And when I click remove, okay, I'm going to give it a very bad comment. Essentially, the minute I click submit here, the deprovisioning kicks in. And this is where that push-pull is very important. So pulling it from the target source, understanding what those privileges are, okay, as well as we picked up a change, we're governing that access, and Jerry's now revoked this access from Amanda and pushing it down immediately, okay, in terms of removing those permissions and that access. Okay, so this is the identity cube in a whole. So just to catch up on that is that we aggregate that all from all the sources, we correlate, we make sure that all the information that we've got correlates with an authoritative source, and we then pull it into one single identity cube. Okay, so we spoke about usability earlier as well in terms of requesting access, requesting certain things. Okay, so when we do this, we allow either the manager, only their manager, to be able to request access for their team, or we can say, okay, I can request it for myself or for others. So in this scenario, Jerry might be a manager of employees, but Jerry might also have contractors that report into him and that he's responsible for. So, for example, Jerry can go and request someone to help him with approvers, okay, on the Beyond Trust password safe as an example, or we can request contractors access, okay. This role here, for example, is for contractors that don't have Active Directory groups. So when I request this, and it's from a flat file, for example, we will go and provision a local account on the password safe appliance automatically. Okay, but very important here is that, again, who has access and why they have access and when they have access. So when we're requesting this for others, okay, and I'm going to use our onboarded Luke Skywalker, okay, if I'm requesting this for Luke, okay, there's two ways that we can do this. One is creating that better behavior and more secure habits is by setting what we call a sunset date. So when Jerry requests access for Luke, he's able to go and say, well, Luke only needs this until Tuesday the 13th, okay? And he puts that date in, okay? When he submits this, we're going to automatically flag that in the system to say that when the 13th hits, okay, we're going to remove that access automatically from them, okay? But if Jerry's busy and Jerry's not able to, remember that, and he doesn't set that expiration date, when he submits the request, it's going to go through a workflow approval, okay, which is very important. Again, we're verifying all the time, okay? So Jerry's requested the access. Jerry might be thinking, well, maybe the guys are very busy, okay, and they're just going to approve the access, okay? Or I didn't put that sunset date in because I know that I'm going to have to request that access again later on, so I'm not going to put in that sunset date, okay? This is now audited. There's a paper trail for it. It's gone through a paper trail and an audit process, okay? In my environment, I didn't do that for simplicity and just to show the use case. But essentially, the request was submitted. We're going through that SOD policy check where we can start saying, okay, well, Luke is part of this group or has all these permissions and entitlements, okay? But Luke also has these. Is he allowed those? Is he allowed having those? Does it violate a policy that we put on? And those are detective controls that we're able to put in place, okay? What happens now is that we go and provision that automatically, okay? And we start governing that access. So if I go to Luke's cube now, which is on Amanda, sorry, it logged me out. We are going to be able to see now that Luke has got that access, okay? So if I go to look at my team, and I go and look at Luke Skywalker, and I look at the roles, I can now see that Luke has now been granted this access. Okay. But the beauty of this is that this isn't a birthright access. Okay. This is a requested access, which means it can easily be removed. So Amanda's got the ability to go and do good governance and go and remove this access. Okay. Simply by clicking the remove access button. Okay. But also similarly, if we have those workflow approvals in place, what potentially happens then is that since it's beyond trust and it's privileged roles or access profiles and that sort of thing, you can have the 5-tier or the 2-tier or 3-tier or whatever it may be. So from a governance perspective, Luke requests access. Okay. It goes to Luke's manager, which is Amanda Ross. Then it can go to the system owner, and then it can go to a governance group. So depending on the risk of that particular access or role that they're requesting, depends on those layers. And then the governance group is potentially maybe an executive management or a business analyst or a security operations team. Okay. So I'm just cognizant of.
Right.
Thanks, Mustafa. And I think that's a really good example of how we've tied the governance decisions to the provisioning piece, to the securing of the access by tying those solutions together.
Absolutely. So I think, exactly as you just phrased it right now, right? So hopefully, as you've seen from this short demo, this deep integration between SailPoint and Beyond Trust allows you to answer the 3 key identity security questions where it overlaps with your privileged access. And those are, who has access to what? Should they have access to those resources? And what are they actually doing with that access once it's granted? Which is obviously encompassed by best-in-class auditing and reporting on both ends. So, just as you can go back and replay a specific session using privileged access to understand what was done with that access during that session, you can also go back and, understand how and why was that access provisioned to that user in the first place? How and why did they get that access itself?
Yeah, and putting that level of information, pulling, the controls around the access to privileged accounts, who the users of those privileged accounts, where they are, applying conditional access policies and entitlements, and putting that data in the hands of people is key to achieving this zero trust approach, right?
Absolutely. And so here from a technical perspective, right, here you can see how the 3 different technologies that we spoke about come together to give you that identity-centric zero trust architecture. So your access management solution is essentially the gateway for end users to access all those applications and resources they've been authorized to. They're typically authenticated through your directory services. Now, Beyond Trust sits beside the access management solution as that additional, adding that additional layer of security and audit around specific access to your privileged resources. Mm-hmm. And then finally, SailPoint as your identity security solution governs the access that's granted to users across all of those different systems. So, all of the changes that may occur to a user as part of their life cycle within your organization, be it whether they joined, they left, they changed roles, or maybe just being out for a period of time, such as, childcare leaves, all of those changes are reflected in their access across all of these different systems. And, that ultimately affects whether a user with access to a privileged account can even access that system in the first place.
And importantly, if we don't trust it, we can revoke it, right?
Absolutely. So you have that continuous governance around who has access to what and continuous visibility into what they're doing. So you can really achieve that, zero trust architecture we've been talking about. Yeah. And, we've touched lightly on that during the demo, right? So how does it all work? You define these groups and what permissions they have within Beyond Trust. And then all of those permissions appear in SailPoint through the SCIM protocol interface. Now, on the SailPoint side, you define the roles that users should have as joiners, movers, leavers, And then all of those roles and access permissions are provisioned automatically into BeyondTrust, again through the bidirectional SCIM protocol interface. So you kind of ensure that people have the right access in real time.
Yeah, and you're removing that manual step of ensuring that you've applied all of your controls and the errors and security weaknesses that can introduce.
Absolutely. So one other question could be why BeyondTrust and SailPoint, right? Well, the answer is industry leaders, plain and simple. So BeyondTrust is the industry leader in privileged access management. SailPoint is the industry leader in identity, security, and governance. So it only makes sense that the two best products in the industry just come together to help solve this problem for our customers. And hopefully from the demo and from what we've been discussing so far, you can see that there are basically three key benefits for having this kind of tight integration across these two systems. Automating that access to your users ensures that access is provisioned correctly and on time when users join, move, or leave within your organization. You have that central location for your managers and IT staff to manage all privileges within a single business interface. So that eliminates the need for business users such as managers to have to interface with different applications just in order to understand and control who has access to what. And then finally, governing the lifecycle of privileged access through your identity security solution ultimately reduces the risk of a malicious actor that using that access when they should not have had it in the first place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So essentially, you should have a good idea right now about how all these three different technologies can come together, so that you essentially right now you're able to verify every single access request, as in who is behind that access. You're able to verify the context of those requests and ultimately decide based on those different parameters. You'll be able to understand why that access is needed and seamlessly manage it. And you'll have a clear audit trail of that access from it being granted to it being used and all the way till it being removed eventually. And we actually have some very, very nice material on both the BeyondTrust and the SailPoint side, just explaining again, some of the details that we've discussed today in a bit more details on both sides. And I would really suggest that whenever you have time, please check out those two solution pages and let us know what you think.
Thanks very much, Mustafa. I think it's a really important part, the ability to control the identity, and we're continuing to discuss identity throughout the day. Up next, we have the Q&A. Hopefully, Kevin will have solved his technical gremlins by then, but Mustafa and myself will be available for the Q&A. And then we've got some customer success and pitfall stories. So if you want to hear from people who've been through this journey, implemented it, and how they're succeeding in achieving zero trust approaches or better management of identity, please do tune into those sessions. I hope this has been useful. Thank you again, Mustafa, and we'll speak to you in the Q&A.
Thank you very much.